Hey guys, I hope you all are doing well. Today I wanted to give you 5 tips to help you get more into reading. As a reader and book lover myself, something I get asked a lot by non-readers is how they can get more into reading, or in some cases how they can get back into reading. I get this question a lot from adults who have kind of stopped reading over the years, whether it's because they've been too busy or because they've kind of been put off reading by school assignments, that sort of thing. But I also get asked this question quite a bit by parents who are hoping to get their kids more into reading. So what I thought I would do for this video is give you guys kind of 5 general tips that I think anybody can use to increase their love of reading, and I also want to then give you 3 more specific parent-oriented tips to help foster a love of reading in your kids. Though I should say that I'm dealing with funky fall afternoon lighting, so if you see like a glowing hand over here, just ignore it, you know, it's just the magic of fall. These tips will be good for anybody, whether you were a reader previously or not, but this first one I feel like will be especially helpful to people who maybe never read before outside of assigned reading for school, and that would be to mine the genres that you are already interested in. What I mean by this is look at all of the other media you consume, all of the TV shows you love, the movies you rewatch over and over again, the video games you play, the music you like. What sort of thing appeals to you? I think the most obvious crossover here is genre, so of course if you are interested in a specific genre of film or television, there's generally a correlating book genre for that. For example, if you really like period dramas, you might like classics, modern classics, or historical fiction. I know I mentioned music earlier and that can seem like a less obvious connection, but if you are somebody who, say, likes kind of lyric heavy, really melodic, maybe kind of acousticy, indie type stuff, you might find that you really enjoy literary fiction. Random as that sounds, the only way I can ever describe Kazuo Ishiguro's writing style, for example, is lyrical. I also wanted to mention this tip because I personally am a huge fan of movie novelizations and fan fiction or kind of extended universe fiction. For example, I'm a huge fan of the Star Wars films, but I'm also a huge fan of the movie novelizations of those films. I love that you get more character backstory. I love that you get to read inside the characters' minds, and it's just kind of like seeing the film from a slightly different angle. Sticking with the Star Wars example, there are so many kind of extended universe Star Wars books that you can get into, whether you are a kid or an adult. There really is something out there for you, and I think you'll find that most big franchises, movie franchises, even video game franchises, have similar fiction out there. Now say you were a reader once upon a time but have just kind of fallen out of the habit, well then my second tip for you would be to go back and reread an old favorite. Now maybe you're 28 and you're thinking, but I haven't had a favorite book since Harry Potter in the 9th grade. That's okay, go read Harry Potter. It doesn't matter what level you're reading at, just read what makes you happy. Now, while you're rereading, I want you to take note of a couple of things. First of all, what is it about the book that you love so much? I realize there's going to be some nostalgia factor there, but if you could kind of focus in on, is it something with the characters? Is it the plot? Is it the setting? Is it like a specific genre that you find yourself really drawn to? Just keep a mental note of all those things, because then you can use those to go and find similar books once you've finished your reread. Tip number 3 would be comic books and graphic novels. Don't knock them until you try them. I know it can be kind of counterintuitive to start reading comic books as an adult, but you know what? They're stories, they're reading, and if they get you excited, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think comic books can be a great place to start getting into reading because each individual volume will be relatively short, relatively fast-paced, and yet there's gonna be an overarching plot line that hopefully will keep you reading and just kind of get you into the habit of going to a store, picking up the book, reading it cover to cover. Graphic novels tend to be a bit longer, and I think they can be a real gateway drug into, say, more traditional prose fiction. My 4th tip for you guys would be to join a community of readers. And honestly, this is so very, very easy in this day and age. You don't even have to have a physical book club near you that you're interested in. You can always jump on Goodreads or join us here on BookTube for all the bookish conversation. If you are watching this video, I'm assuming you know at least a little bit about BookTube, but if you somehow don't, if this is your first ever BookTube video, welcome. We are a community of YouTubers who like to talk about reading and books, and I guarantee you that if you just spend like 20 minutes a day watching BookTube videos, you will get this burning urge to go and pick up a book. Trust me, it never fails. Being part of a community of readers, whether that is physical in real life or online, can just add a really important social element to what is otherwise a very solitary activity, reading. And I think that way, you know, if you feel like you have to choose between reading and socializing, you just don't have to. And my fifth and final general tip would be to read what you want, not what you think you should be reading. Now, I say this because I think a lot of us who grew up with a burning love for stories and for books and for reading went to school, were handed required reading lists, and immediately were like, ugh, this isn't fun anymore, this is a chore. And then we kind of associated reading with something we had to do, not something we wanted to do. Of course, if you are still in school, I am not telling you that you can ditch your reading lists and never do your reading assignments. On the contrary, I would highly encourage you to do your reading assignments and annotate like mad. But I'm just saying that when you have free reading time for yourself, or when you have graduated and you can read whatever it is that you want, don't feel like you have to be reading classics or important books or the newest big release that everybody's talking about. And to go back to what I touched on briefly when I mentioned Harry Potter, don't feel like you have to be reading at a certain level. I know, for example, in the book world, there tends to be a little bit of weird elitism surrounding YA fiction and people looking down their noses at people who only read YA. You know what? It doesn't matter. As long as you are reading and it's making you happy, then I think that should be good enough for everybody else around you. My lighting was getting weird and I had to adjust real quick, so let's move into 3 tips for parents who want to foster good reading habits with their children. Tip number 1, always make books available to your kids. First of all, take your kids to the library and get them their own library card. Not only are these books free, but I feel like it's a really great learning experience to help teach them responsibility, because they don't own the book and because they have to make sure that it gets back to the library in one piece. They're gonna have to learn how to take care of it, how to keep track of things, and how to remember deadlines. So, you know, killing lots of birds with one stone there. Probably not the best analogy. And although I don't think you have to spend a ton of money on books, I think it's always nice if you can have some sort of little home library, whether those are books that your kids get from relatives, whether those are books that you used to read as kids and that you've rescued from your parents' house and just have set up for your kids to look at. You know, just make sure that there are books at home that are available for them, that are at their reading level, so that they don't get frustrated and don't feel like books are something that they will never be able to enjoy on their own. When I was a kid, Kindles didn't exist, but again, you have a really great opportunity there to get books pretty cheaply if you own an iPad or a Kindle or some kind of e-reader device. I think this is a really great way to allow your kids to have screen time that isn't them mindlessly playing a video game too. So just something to think about, and another easy way to get books in your kids' hands. My second tip for parents would be to not micromanage your kids' reading. I feel like I'm full of examples today, but back when I was in high school, I worked at a children's bookshop, and something I used to see quite frequently, specifically with young boys, was that they would come in with their moms and they'd go run off to the fantasy section because they wanted to read about dragons and knights and all that exciting stuff, but their moms would pick out some like children's classic that they felt like they had to read because it was one of the best books and it would be good for them. Quite frankly, if your kid is excited about reading, that's all you need to worry about. You've done your job. You've shown them that books can be fun, that stories can be fun, that reading and the effort that goes into reading can be totally worth it. So why does it matter what they're reading? On the other side of that, if your kid feels like they're ready for more intense, more serious, more adult reading, let them go with that. Don't micromanage. We tend to forget that kids are really good self-filters. So if they read a few chapters of something and they don't get it, they're gonna get bored and put it aside. If they read something and it's disturbing to them, they're not gonna wanna continue. Of course, when it comes to things like graphic violence or sexual content, you know your kid better, you know what they're ready for far better than I do, and I would never presume to dictate when a kid should read stuff like that. But keep in mind, if they do read something with a little bit more sexual content than you might have been expecting, that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really great opportunity for you to open a discussion with your kid and make sure that they're open talking with you about anything. And my third and final tip for parents would be to read with your kids. Now, obviously, when they are very young, I think it's a great idea to read to your kids before bed, read to them before nap time. Say you're having a slow day at home and you just want to relax. read a book with them then. You might end up reading the same picture book 75 times in a single week, but what you're doing is helping to instill a love of books and reading in your kids, and you're teaching them that reading isn't something that's hard and a chore, but that it's something that you can do together and really enjoy. And I don't think you should stop reading with your kids just because they start getting older. In fact, when they start learning to read for themselves, I think having them read aloud to you can be a really great way to kind of continue that tradition of sharing stories with each other. And I know you're probably thinking, my high schooler doesn't even want to talk to me, let alone read a book with me, but I would still encourage you to do so. In fact, the last time I read a book with my dad, I was probably a junior in high school. I think that was when the 7th book of Harry Potter came out, when the Deathly Hallows came out. We only had one copy of the book, so I would read a chapter, then my dad would read a chapter. I would take it to summer school with me, and then he would read it in the evenings, and then over dinner we would talk about it. So even if you can't read it physically in the same room together, read the same things that your kids are reading. It's a great starting point, a connecting point during a time in their lives where they probably feel like they're getting as far from you as possible. All right, I have literally talked until the sun went down, but those are all of my tips for how to get more into reading, whether you are asking for yourself or for your kids. I'm sure there's all kinds of other great advice out there, so if you have anything you would like to add, please feel free to leave a comment down below so everybody can scroll through and get some good reading inspiration. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons like Shu Todoroki for making videos like this possible, and I want to thank you so much for watching. So have a great day wherever you are, happy reading, and I will see you next time. Bye! Bit of elitism, a little bit of elitism, I can't say that word.